We have a program that I'd like to get underway, and first I'd just like to introduce the program and myself.
Yeah, why don't you pick that up so you don't have to bend over?
I'll bend it up for me, and then I can bend over. My name's Brian Murphy. I'm co-chair of the Stewardship Committee along with Tammy Brown. And the job of the Stewardship Committee is a lot of fun. So the first thing I want to do is I want to encourage people who might find a fire for communicating about the wonders of St. Paul's to join our committee. We are a good group, but we need help. And especially we need communicators. The job of stewardship, and the work of the Stewardship Committee is not mostly asking people for money. It is mostly about communication. So if you have talents around communication, if you're a writer, or if you don't mind public speaking, or videography, or editing, these are the things we need help with. So I hope that you will think about it yourself, or if you know of someone else, please ask them to consider getting in touch with me, Brian, and they have my number here. So the second thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for being a member of our church. Thank you for the many ways in which you contribute to the health and vitality of St. Paul's. Stewardship does focus a lot on money, but we also try to raise up a sense of gratitude for everything that everyone does here. And I know that there are so many ways in which people support the church here through their efforts. So thank you is to be said. We're saying it in a big way next Sunday, as Jeannie mentioned at the pulpit today, with not ice cream actually, but it's custard.
Oh,
but it's a good form of ice cream, I think. And finally, I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're up to this morning. This session was conceived of as a way for, in this season of stewardship, which isn't an active solicitation season, this is a season of thanking and educating. So what we're trying to do this morning is to teach, at least to teach through stories. And so these wonderful volunteers have agreed to participate as panelists, and Jackie Acho is our moderator, and I'm going to turn it over to Jackie right now.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for all that you do for stewardship for St. Paul's. I think he asked me to do this because I'm your senior warden this year, but I was only too happy to accept because I love to channel my inner Oprah. So I was thrilled when these folks agreed to have this conversation, and that's what we're going to have, is a conversation. So we have E.B. Donnelly, we have Karen Moss, Andy Wheaton, and Jennifer Garfield to talk to us today about how they approach giving and what kind of philosophy it has in their lives. And so without much further ado, I'd like to just turn it over to you to give just a brief introduction. And maybe we'll start with you, E.B., and go that way, because I know, Jennifer, you have some prepared remarks that you'd like to give after your intro, too. Just tell, for those who don't know, because a lot of you guys are well known, but for those who don't know, kind of who you are, how long you've been at St. Paul's, a little bit about your family.
I'm E.B. Donnelly. We've been at St. Paul's since, maybe my voice very, perhaps not. I know, I wouldn't want anybody to miss a word.
No, exactly.
I'm a private Episcopalian. I actually grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, going to the Episcopal church, baptized there when I was about 3 months old. We came to St. Paul's in the early 90s, just before the birth of our second child. And we came to St. Paul's primarily because it's the church that my husband's family had been affiliated with. And being as how we had considerable skepticism about organized religion at that point in our lives, but also wanted to connect with the family, to a church family. It felt right to come to a place that had family connections and also the religious home feeling that I had grown up with, that I really was important to me when I was a child. So it's been a very fruitful relationship. I've got 2 children, 28 and My son Andrew is 28, my daughter Gwen is 24, and they both grew up here. In terms of the giving to the church, it's really evolved as we've gotten more involved. And I guess I feel like the monetary giving and the giving of our time are tied in together. And it just feels like I want to support a place that does so much that's beneficial to our family personally. And one thing I love about this particular place is that we keep looking for different ways to be involved with the community as well. And we turn it over to Karen.
Thank you.
Sorry. So I'm Karen Moss. I am born and raised Anglican in the Bahamas, where my husband and I are from. I was baptized there, confirmed there, married there, all in the same church. Convinced my husband, who was Baptist, the son of a Baptist pastor, to become Anglican. The plan was that I was going to become Baptist, but that didn't work out so well. Anyways, here we are. You know, we relocated to Florida as a married couple and had our daughter there, and you know, attended the Episcopal church there, as well as in Virginia, where we had our son, Carrington. And so, you know, growing up in the Bahamas as in the church, I attended Sunday school every Sunday, sorry, not every day. Also, became a Sunday school teacher, served on the vestry, all within the same church, the parish that I grew up in. My mother, I was able to observe. My dad always went to the Methodist church. Now he's Anglican, so converted as well. But always observed my mom in her giving. Every week she would, you know, put her amount in her envelope and put it in church, and that was the first example that I observed of stewardship. Apart from that, the giving of her time, that was a lot to the church on a weekly basis. And so for us as a family, giving, yes, a bit came natural, but we had to find our own way in terms of how we as a couple, as a family, decided to do it. And it's primarily through, nowadays, a lot of prayer, deciding together what a feasible amount would be. One of the things I would like to mention just briefly is that we oftentimes think of our giving and our lives as being, in the words of Leah, in her words this morning, very neat and orderly and controlled, but it's not always that way. But it's within that realm we have to figure out how much we're going to be able to give, and there's lots of different ways that we've explored with doing it, but also setting an amount that's reasonable. We often like to think of it as 10%. Sometimes that's maybe not reasonable to start with, but whatever, you know, we're able to start with as a starting point. Because the good thing is, if we go over, yay! You know, so that's kind of the way we approach it, and we look at the projections for the year, what our job situations are going to be like, seeing that I've been in transition quite a bit. But the good thing is we're still able to contribute something, and I think that's most important, and consistently. So.
Thanks, Karen. So my name is Andy Wheaton, and we came to St. Paul's about 10 years ago. Like many families, we came from one Protestant tradition and Roman Catholic tradition. So my wife grew up Catholic. I grew up Scotch Presbyterian. So being named Andrew in a Presbyterian church is like being named Patrick in an Irish Catholic church. So, and my hair used to be like red, red, red. So that's how I grew up. And we used to go to Fairmount Presbyterian for years when we were first married. But once my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, we decided we wanted to find a new church, something new for both of us together. And so for like many families here, the Episcopal church, and particularly St. Paul's, has been a bridge church for us. And so we were able to find a home together where it wasn't like that was kind of a fun thing for us both to go through and learn about it all anew as a couple and then as a family. So this is new for, actually, no one else in my family is Anglican or Episcopal or anything. We're the only ones.
Everyone will be now that Bishop Curry gave
Exactly.
royal wedding.
You're right.
And it's been eye-opening for like our extended family too. About, you know, we talk about these things and how they're the same and how they're different. And so that's been a way that we're kind of making our own home here for us.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm also a cradle Episcopalian. I grew up in New Orleans and went to an Episcopal girls' boarding school in Virginia and have lived in Cleveland ever since 1957. We moved into a house a half a block from St. Paul's, so it wasn't going to be that it was hard for us to get there, though we were rather frequently late. But my own evolution in giving really began when I was a child. My grandfather, who I saw a lot of, often talked to me about how doing nice things for other people could be a great source of happiness for me. It did take time for this to sink in. As an adult with a young family and becoming a regular churchgoer, I came to see that pledging a substantial amount seemed an appropriate responsibility. As the years went by, the church community continued to grow as part of my life. I came to welcome doing what I could to help this place flourish and become a place where lives could be transformed. I felt a sense of a generous spirit leading me. Obligation became joy, whether the giving was fairly easy or, as happened, it became sacrificial. In my rather long life of 85 years, I have been repaid many times over by this special community, which is St. Paul's Church, whether in times of stress and sadness, or in times of renewal and joy. I think about this often, and I feel grateful for what I've been given here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So, all of you have talked about how this community came to feel like a home. Can you talk about when St. Paul started to feel like home for you?
I have a little anecdote I'll share. So I have 3 daughters. Maybe you've seen them running around. So when my first daughter was born, and we received the kind of I think it was from like the Women's Guild or some sort of welcome package that had like a stuffed animal and had a book that was signed by Alan at the time, and it was Prayer for a Child. And so then our second daughter was born, and then the Prayer for a Child book came. We're like, oh, it's official now. Like there was something about getting that package and feeling welcoming from the whole community that made it so special to us, that she was really being born into a bigger family than just our nuclear family. And that had a touch point. So then when my third child was born and we got the Prayer for a Child, we're like, yes. So there's these small touchstones like that are, it's a small thing, but it kind of matters to us, and we're always going to keep those for the girls when they grow up.
Thank you, Andy.
So similar to Andy, our draw, it's about the kids. Our draw to the church, to St. Paul's, was because of our kids. We have only been here for a little under 2 years, and we visited on Easter the year before, and one of the signs we received was that there was an Easter egg hunt. That was huge. But we couldn't stay for it. But it was the children's programs at St. Paul's that gave us the nod of yes, that this is where we needed to be. But Kenny and I, both growing up in the church, we feel is important for our kids to do the same. Wherever they may go in this world, we know that a good foundation is what's going to sustain them, and that's really important to us. So in visiting a few churches around, and it was clear that St. Paul's was the place for us to be, and we kind of tried to hit the ground running, getting them involved in activities, and as much as we could, becoming involved to a smaller extent. But it was kind of almost right away that we knew we had to get grounded to kind of keep the consistency for them being in church.
Thank you.
I thought it was the breakfast.
Oh, that's
Amy cooks the breakfast.
Making sure. Making sure I get my credit. In terms of when we really felt at home here. It was really kind of a gradual thing. And again, I don't know how it would have been coming without children, but it was tied up with the kids because my son he did not have the easiest time as a young person and as an elementary school kid. And he had more acceptance with the adults here, not necessarily the kids, because that comes or not. But he did have more acceptance from some of the adults here. He just had a place where sometimes we could talk things out and not feel maybe judged in the same way, maybe just a little different understanding. And that was really, really helpful. And another thing that really, we had an experience where one of my husband's relatives committed suicide, and Peter Walsh, who was a priest here at that time, was really helpful in speaking with him and kind of making sense of what that means and where you go and what you do. And the church was here, and we felt like we wanted to be here for other people. If that need should come up, we just wanted to be here if we were needed.
Thank you.
I guess the thing that made me feel most welcome here was, we lived here about 6 months, and you heard that some relative told us that they really weren't friendly here at St. Paul's. And sometime, maybe when we moved in April, or maybe it was in the fall, we were called and asked if we would like to come to a group of St. Paul's members who lived in our basic neighborhood, and come and have dinner together. And we said, we can't say they're not friendly. So we went, and this was something John O'Hare started. There really was a feeling of this is a community thing going on. And so we figured, we better get over there. And as I said, it wasn't difficult, it was half a block away. But that was certainly my first feeling of being welcomed here.
Thank you. So how did you come to, from the moment that you started to feel at home here, dedicating time, treasure, talent to St. Paul's? How did that evolve for you? Because I know a lot of you give a lot of time, treasure, and talent.
I'm not sure I've given a whole lot of time. Probably I was busiest here when, early in the days of the cooperative nursery school, when they decided they needed to have someone who would be paid to be the administrator. That means send out the bills, collect the money when it came in, and buy the supplies and new equipment, and as it turned out, be involved in the hiring and, in one case, firing of a teacher. And so I got $500 a year to do that. And I figured out I was making somewhere around 50 cents an hour. So it made a volunteer job feel more tolerable to me since I was pretty busy with my 3 kids. And somehow, just being in the building that much made me feel much more involved. And then, for some reason, when my husband was fairly young, maybe in his middle 30s, Shade McCracken thought it'd be good to run the Every Member canvas. And that's when we both figured out that there indeed was an obligation to do rather better than we had thought we would okay doing on our giving. But through the years, here and there have been times that I've been involved here, and I was probably the earliest the latest first time, and of course only time, vestry member here when I went on the vestry when I was, I think, 78.
I think we need more wisdom now, actually.
So I'll add, a consistent thing that I found is often when you give something, you actually get quite a bit more back. And that sounds like such a little like axiom, but I found it in my own experience. And I wouldn't say I give a lot, but or time or money as much as maybe I should. But what I do, I always feel like in some sort of diffuse way I'm receiving more. So an experience I had was when the Godly Play program had already been started. I looked around and I realized like all my kids' teachers were all female. All their preschool teachers, almost 100%. And so Jonathan, Ren, and I both said like they need some like male teachers. So we signed up and we went through the training because it goes both ways, right? So we said I want them to have some sort of like male influence in the classroom in the Sunday school. And so we went through the training the weekend that was hosted here at St. Paul's, and I just got so much out. I got such a kick out of it. I had so much fun doing it, and had so much fun being in the classroom with my kids and all these little kids that now they're growing up. And so I keep that always in the back of my mind. When you give a little something, you'll almost always get quite a bit back more. And I think it's like that with the financial giving. I think it's like that with the time giving and the talent and experience. So it encourages me to keep growing in that. It's something I need to grow in personally, and I find that there's a kind of a growth edge there is the term people use, but that's something that I'm trying to do for myself.
Thank you.
So I'm one that's always bargaining with God. I'm always making, I should rephrase that. So I'm always making covenants with God. I am. I'm always making a covenant with God, whether it's, a need for the family, a need for me personally. I'm always having these conversations with God about, what I'm prepared to do for this ask. And so, giving has become a part of that. I think I mentioned in the reflection that I shared in church, it's amazing to me how well things line up in our lives, be it financial or whatever aspect of it may be, once we make this covenant with God and follow through on it. So, for us, it's saying to God, this is what I'm committed to do. And yes, here are these things that we're praying for, kind of almost in this package. And there's never been a moment where he hasn't come through. And I also recently heard somebody say how much, giving is not for you, the individual. And I shared this with my husband. I don't even remember who said it, but they were talking about, like just giving somebody a small gift for their birthday or a thank you card for something that they did, how it releases these hormones within you and make you feel so good from doing it. Forget the other person, kind of, sort of. But how good it is to give. And, I'm like, gee, this is right. You feel so good just by picking up some flowers for a teacher or writing a thank you note for somebody inviting you to their home. And it oftentimes doesn't have a large price tag that comes along with it. And I think giving for this purpose for the church is kind of like that for me. It releases a chemical that feels good, and it reminds us how much we're walking not just in one way, but in many ways in the will of God. So.
Thank you.
Oh, no, you're good. No, I'm looking at you because my husband was in one of the inaugural classes of St. Paul's preschool. He probably took his tuition. So there we go. In terms of involvement, it really started out for us as we're kind of slow to get involved. We like to look first. So one thing that was actually nice about St. Paul's was that we were, it felt like it was a community that would allow you to come and kind of be on the edges a little bit before you were ready to dive in. So I know that some people that might feel less welcoming, but to us it was perfect because we really wanted to get a sense of things. But the involvement probably came first with the kids because was a Sunday school teacher for first the one child and then the other until it was made known to me that it was time not to be their Sunday school teacher anymore. And then I got into the choir, which is one of my big loves, so that's been a wonderful thing to be involved with. And just different ways. And in terms of the financial giving, we were in a pretty precarious financial situation for a while, so I don't think we did tons when we were beginning. But then it just felt fair. It's almost like there's a balance. And for me, it's, you make the commitment and then you just do it. It's like you make a commitment to get up and go to work and then you just do it. It's not, you don't have to decide every time. And so that made it, for me, a less stressful thing. You know, you make the decision and then just go on about it. And in terms of deciding amounts, we just really had to, similar to you, look at our situation, and it was important that if we made a commitment, it was one that we could keep, and then if we could do extra, like you said, hooray. So that's kind of where we were on that. But I kind of like the thought that you were, yeah, my boy was, my husband was coming when he was 5, and you probably were the registrar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to pick up on this theme of how giving makes us feel good. And Jennifer, I'd like to go back to one of the comments you had in your intro about how the idea of giving turned from duty to joy. Can you tell us more about how that happened?
Well, I'm not sure. It just came as I was more involved with this and also with a couple of things in the community. And we did have more coming in. It seemed that it felt good to do something. And I think that one of the other lovely things about St. Paul's is there's so many ways that you can give in a small way or a medium way or a big way and have the joy of someone being happy about that. And it almost goes back to something I've come to believe in also, is that when people do a good job on something, I always try to tell them, that was a great job you did. Or, thank you for doing that really wonderful job you did. Because I don't think we thank people enough and tell them that they did well enough. We assume if people are able to do something well, they don't need that. Everyone needs that.
Thank you. Great job. So I think we have time for one last question, and I thank you for sharing everything you've shared so far. I'm curious how you think about church within the context of all the other places that you donate time, treasure, talent.
I'll just make one statement.
Mm-hmm.
So it was recently, not recently, but this I think was at a time when we weren't giving as dutifully as we should. It was mentioned that, you know, when you look at your bank account, you look at your statements and you see where your money is actually going, it's kind of a predictor of where your priorities are. And I thought, whoa, okay. And so I think that's one way of looking, because we do get pulled in a lot of different directions, alumni associations and different charitable organizations, which, you know, it's all great ways to give back to the community. But we're also, you know, called as Christians to fulfill our duties to God and the church. So I think, you know, that from a purely financial perspective, I think helped me as an individual, I think, to rethink, you know, how giving is actually followed through on in terms of fulfilling the covenant that I have with God. So.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Andy?
I'll say it's a little tangential, but let's talk a little bit about how we feel about it. And that's so I usually have a little bit of more anxiety about money. You know, so I think that with these 3 young children, our big boogeyman is saving for college and how to save for retirement and college at the same time. And every time I turn around, it's telling me college is going to cost $200,000 a year. So for me, the act of giving to the church is actually very free, in the sense that I know that I'm making that commitment, and it's this thing we hear a lot about, the scarcity mentality versus the abundance mentality. And when I think about, if I'm thinking too narrow and I'm thinking scarcity, I'm so worried about watching all my hundreds of dollars in this thing, hundreds of dollars in that thing, if I just kind of let it go and I recognize and take a breath and make sure that I give to the church, it's very freeing for me, and it actually kind of pokes a hole in that bubble, and it makes me less worried about the future money. If I know that I'm kind of taking care of my business year by year, I make my pledge, and I know that's part of what we're going to do, and the other stuff will just happen. It just relieves a lot of that anxiety for you. So that's one way that giving to the church is different for me than giving to my kids in a way through their college, and kind of giving to other things. It's that it reminds me that God is abundant, and it's not that money's going to come off the money tree, but it's okay to let it go and just trust. And that every year when we go through that budgeting period, it's actually not stressful. It's actually a relief to think about making our pledge to St. Paul's.
Thank
I wanted to add to that how you make substantial commitment to something else, something in the community. And my sense is that they sort of play off of each other. You feel good about doing something in particular that you have a strong interest in outside of the church, but then it comes back to, well, yes, I did that, and wait, I better do that here too, and it'll feel so good. And I'm sure people have made this statement before, but the concept of giving not until it hurts, but giving until it feels good. And that's the step past it hurt.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
And I would agree. I like the way you put that, Jennifer, that I was thinking about the other, there's really one other organization that our family is very involved with, and it's a community arts organization. And to me, they feel intertwined, like their missions are not separate. They're not exactly on top of each other, but they tie in with each other. It's quality of life and making a statement that through money and time and, just showing up, just making a statement of what we think is important. And I feel very strongly about making a statement that this community, where I'm not born here, but I've made a conscious choice to be here. So I'm making a conscious choice to commit to this community in just different ways.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for committing your time here this morning, for committing the way you do to the church, and for having this conversation outside of the stewardship season, so to speak, because this is something we really should be talking to each other about all year long, and help each other come to the most comfortable and joyful place about how we support St. Paul's. So please join me in thanking you.